Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me for the Women's Health and Fertility podcast. My name is Dr. Tina Yang, and I am your host. Today, I am thrilled to invite Benjamin Zappin of Five Flavor Herbs as my guest today. I have known Benjamin for over a decade and have used his incredible formulas to help many of my fertility patients and many of my cases of women's health conditions. Benjamin has co-founded Five Flavor Herbs to provide his community with exceptional herbal formulas supported by his decades of clinical experience, along with his unwavering dedication to crafting high-quality herbal extracts. Benjamin is acclaimed for his work as an herbalist, traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, and licensed acupuncturist. Ben has specialized in mental health, women's health, and integrative infectious disease. In his free time, you'll find Benjamin cooking and studying music. Well, welcome, Benjamin, to the Women's Health and Fertility Podcast. I am so excited for you to be here today with me. I've been thinking about this interview for a while, and I think the last time I saw you, or actually two times ago, I ran into you at an acupuncture conference in San Diego. And that's
Mhm.
when I was like, oh, I definitely need to have Benjamin on here to talk about Chinese herbs, the efficacy, the safety of it, and really kind of demystify some of the thoughts out there about Chinese herbs and the misunderstanding of how Chinese herbal medicine can work integratively with Western medicine. But before we start on that subject, I kind of wanted to go back and talk about your history, how you got into Chinese medicine, and what inspired you to create this amazing herbal company.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Thanks for having me, Tina.
You're
We'll
welcome,
we'll
Ben.
we'll,
My
we'll
pleasure.
talk through the hour a little bit about how we work together, which I think will be a meaningful thing to highlight. Um, I was at the right place at the right time, and over 30 years ago in Santa Cruz, California, which is a really unique, at least at the time, really unique intersection of herbal industry, big ground floor herbal industry in America. Um, Midwifery had just been licensed. There's a Chinese medical university that's still there, Five Branches University.
Mhm.
A lot of ground floor people who helped pioneer legalization and practice of TCM or East Asian medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine in the West, as well as Western herbalists and um, people formulating companies, people running companies, people who were instrumental in the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act,
Mhm.
which helped keep the dietary supplement and herbal industry a self regulated industry by defining terms in collaboration with the FDA for one, how we can communicate to audiences about how the tools we provide work, either within a clinical encounter or outside of it, direct to consumer. Uh, and also codified good manufacturing practices
Mhm.
in step towards it being a self-regulated industry. So some of the people who really pioneered that were my first teachers when I was 20 years old, and bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. My background, I grew up in Southern California, not far from where you work in Long
Mhm.
Beach, and
Mhm.
um, I didn't know that I was going to middle school and high school with some of the families whose grandparents pioneered the use of granulated extracts of Chinese herbs in the West,
Yeah,
which is
that's very
which is
cool.
fun to reconnect with them around that. Uh, but grew up in a very Western medicalized environment and saw the limitations of that, and uh, so that that spoke to me. Saw people get great Western medical care and not survive or not benefit as much, not live a full life, and so um, that was part of my foundation. Came in contact with these teachers that really inspired me. And my first work was working in apothecaries, doing medicine making, wild harvesting plants, from uh, receiving plants from TCM uh, importers as well as granules. So I was involved in compounding and dispensing, when I was 21, 22, dispensing to practitioners as well as doing medicine making. And
Hmm.
so just immersed in it. It was
Yeah.
essentially,
What a fun experience, though, to be able to have so much access to, such cool herbal products in the beginning, in the
yeah,
infancy here, at least in, on the, Mhm.
inspiration, passion, and dedication was
Yes,
like my
100%.
immersed with these people who were brilliant, and
Hmm.
some of my original teachers are now in their 70s and 80s
Hmm.
and still working and still creating and still studying and teaching. It's really beautiful. They're modeling how to be alive and vital for
Right.
me.
That's the beauty of Chinese medicine, FTCM, right? It's a medicine for longevity and it takes into accountability all the decades of life and all the phases of life, which is so miraculous, and how to optimize your health throughout all those phases. But yeah, so how did you decide to start your own herbal company? That's like a huge adventure, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Um, I got licensed as an acupuncturist and never stopped my love for medicine making and never stopped my love for connection, direct connection to plants.
Hmm.
And uh, my wife and I were making extracts and selling them to practitioners in Santa Cruz, selling them, compounding and making finished products, and started to get them into stores and do them on a craft level. And it's really fun and exciting. And we moved from Santa Cruz to Oakland, and had like 1,000 square foot basement that we turned into a mini facility. And there was a small business exemption for FDA regulation. So if you're doing cottage level production, uh,
Hmm.
we did that, and we had a roster of customers, and um, it was its own passion project slash what I was dispensing to my patients. And then the small business exemption was lifted for GMPs, and we said, "Oh, how do we get street level with this?" And at the time, we thought, "Oh, this is a meaningful stream of income. We don't want to abandon this stream of income," which was a bit foolish,
Smart.
and in retrospect. And we took out a lease on a building in Oakland, started a brick and mortar ground level herbal apothecary and
Hmm.
pharmacy that people could come fill prescriptions at, uh, education space, clinic, and did manufacturing in the back of that. And started building out all of our, in collaboration with other peers, GMP systems for documentation, authentication of specimens, and
Hmm.
um, batch tracking and whatnot. All the basic tenets of quality control and participation in a regulatory environment. So
Hmm.
it was a gradual escalation into what we've become.
Oh, it sounds like the dream to have it all in one location. Education,
Yeah,
manufacturing, practicing. Like that's like a that's true entrepreneurship right there. So that's really amazing, Ben.
yeah.
And I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to ask you a quick question, for listeners that are not practitioners, can you explain a little bit about what GMP is, what it stands for,
Yeah,
and mhm.
yeah. Uh, GMP means good manufacturing practices, and there you can go look on the FDA's website and see all the detailed documents of what 21 CFR 111 is, which is the dietary supplement guidance document. Dietary supplement GMPs. There are GMPs for pet food, dietary GMPs for pharmaceuticals, OTCs. There's it's the general framework for regulation, and we are one office, the Office of Dietary Supplements
Mhm.
um, within uh, the FDA. And so some basic practices are keeping batch records, master manufacturing records, the duration for which you keep that. You need to authenticate and receive every ingredient and authenticate that it is what it says it is via
Hmm.
scientific
Hmm.
methods, and um, track those, qualify your suppliers, and then be able to track what happened with those ingredients all through production. And on the other end, be able to track where your batches are going to,
Right.
a distributorship level. And then it's the
Hmm.
distributor's role to keep track of to whom things went into commerce. And there's different criteria for different distributorship types. So if
Okay.
there's a need for a recall, if
Yes.
one of our suppliers calls us and says, "Hey, Five Flavors Herbs, you know, there was, we detected salmonella in one of our
Mm.
50 core samples of the 5 tons of uh, fennel that we got." And I'm giving you a real example that happened 10 years ago.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
and they say, "Oh, thanks for letting us know. We haven't put this in production yet. We put this in quarantine. We do our own third party laboratory testing." And uh, they notify the FDA. That was the first time we ever got visited by the FDA. The FDA
Wow.
came
That
and
must have
says,
been
"Where's the fennel?
nerve-wracking.
Where's the fennel from X company?" And we said, "It's already in quarantine. Thanks for
Hmm.
asking." And they said,
Yes.
"Great, send us your lab tests." And no harm, no foul is checks and balances along the way.
Hmm.
And as somebody who all my life has been a little bit rule resistant, I've really, really come to appreciate, all the checks and balances for consumer protection,
Hmm.
forms of standardization, so that medicine can be made with consistency and consumers can understand what they're receiving faithfully, and
Yes.
all the safety checks and balances that go into that as well.
Would you say that it's important for consumers and patients to, when they're reading labels on herbs, that they look for that GMP certification?
So third party GMP certification is meaningful. Um, it's required to get into certain marketplaces. Like, we
Hmm.
maintain a third party GMP certification. It's not required by law. You're required by law to be an FDA registered company.
Got it. Okay.
Um, and so, as an FDA registered company, then you can choose to have a third party verification. And you're required to, we do a lot of contract manufacturing. And
Hmm.
so a lot of the companies that we work with are on Amazon, and they require that. Or Whole Foods Marketplace requires that. Is it
Sure.
essential for
Okay.
consumers? Um, no, but I do think it's useful to. It's one of the best ways to know that the manufacturing facility is FDA registered, which means they're
Yes.
at least aspiring to play by the rules.
Right, right. Oh,
So,
and there's like just a level of just having like peace around the ingredients that are in your herbal formula. And that, like you said, what is stated on the bottle is indeed going to be in your formula.
yep.
So, hmm.
Yeah. Prop 65 is one of the, when you go to the gas station or the coffee shop, it's geared towards alerting consumers when there may be a risk of um, insult or harm to a fetus, and
Hmm.
or may cause cancer. Any chemicals, so you see the gas station, you'll see, chemicals dispensed here are known to cause cancer. So you have a
Hmm.
Prop 65. This is only in California. It's more stringent than the FDA or any EU, which is also very stringent consumer protection laws, um, for heavy metals. And so in
Okay.
California, we test all of our extracts to Prop 65, um, for arsenic, lead, um, cadmium, and mercury, I think is the fourth.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and things that are known to cause harm to a developing fetus. And uh, some of these things are alarmingly in the food supply in much higher levels and
Sure.
concentrations
Right.
than we're allowed to have them in dietary supplements. And so
Right.
that's a common refrain, and it used to be even more severe. Oh, there's heavy metals in Chinese herbs. And
Yeah, you
the
hear that a
reality is
lot.
there's heavy metals concentrated in different manufacturing processes and or bioaccumulated in different soils. So volcanic soils are going to have more heavy metal. Chocolate grown in volcanic soils can be organic and fair, wild, and as groovy as can be, and it may still have high levels of arsenic.
Hmm. That's right.
So can dark leafy greens. So that's a
Yeah, no, it's good to put it in perspective,
yeah.
right, when you're talking about heavy metals. So, as far as Chinese medicine, I mean, you've been involved in Chinese medicine for decades. So, I'm curious to know what kind of changes have you seen over the years in terms of its use, its popularity, acceptance of Chinese herbs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I see a lot of movements that inspire me and some shifts that concern me,
Mm. Hmm.
and try to present those side by side. Uh, there are less people entering the profession, and I think that this causes risk to the profession. I think it's in part due to lack of organizing over the decades.
Hmm.
Schools are closing. Um, Ostensibly, it creates a environment where there's less competition for people and they have more opportunity to become successful
Well, let
in
me back up
ways.
and ask you real
Yeah.
quick, Ben. When you say there's less people entering, do you mean as practitioners,
As
as
new practitioners,
acupuncturists?
there's less new graduates coming out.
Okay.
Um, I believe that the profession did not organize well enough to firmly establish ourselves in more institutions that create jobs.
Hmm.
And so
Right.
individuals come out with a degree to be an entrepreneur, and not
Pretty
everybody
much.
has the
Yes.
fortitude for that.
Right.
Um, at the same time, I've seen the marketplace for jobs grow a lot. You know, a lot. There's a lot more hospital jobs out there, or jobs in federally qualified health centers where Chinese medical practitioners can work and apply their
Hmm.
skills and access people. Um, we haven't hit the right balance point yet. So
Yeah, it's
I have
interesting that,
seen more mainstreaming, which is beautiful, and I celebrate that
yeah,
all the time.
right, right. And it's interesting that you mentioned these job opportunities have opened up. I think these are more like doesn't require you to be an entrepreneur or self-employed, like the VA hospital, for example,
Yeah,
or someone like the naval hospitals are now hiring acupuncturists at a level which is equivalent to like a midwife or a nurse practitioner, which is great for our
yeah,
profession. But those jobs are very far and few between.
yep,
You know, they're really tough to get.
yeah,
And I totally agree with you. Like when I went to school, my business ethics class was just this little short class in a quarter. And I don't know how many times we met. It was probably like less than a dozen times. And, luckily for myself, I have a business background. So,
oh,
but I
good.
look at all the other, colleagues of mine and like the young grads coming out too. I think social media has helped. I
Hmm.
think Instagram has really helped the younger generation practitioners kind of grow and market themselves. But,
Yep,
us older practitioners, we're old school. We're not on social media.
yeah,
We're not doing the TikToks and the Instagram videos and reels and things like that. So I think it's definitely, organically grown. I would say like word of mouth and just really building relationships and other patients referring their friends and family to you. So it's tough. I mean, being a practitioner in our field, and I think in California, where you and I both are rooted, we have some advantages because it's so widely accepted. But I can't even imagine what it's like in the rest of the country, in the other states. So
yeah.
yeah.
Just a counterpoint to that piece is that if you move, I mean, I've like the first two places I lived and practiced, or three, San Francisco, Oakland, and Santa Cruz, like you could literally hit the next practitioner with the rock. from
Yes.
pretty much any business, like business center vantage point.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
it was so saturated, and you're like,
Hmm.
I do this thing too. Like, and
Right, and you're trying to differentiate
yeah,
yourself, right? Like what's your core genius? What's
yeah.
going to be
So,
different? Yeah.
so moving, I often recommend people consider moving to an environment in which you're going to stand out. Maybe there's some acceptance, but you're going to be the second or third acupuncturist in a
Hmm.
200,000 person city. And it
Yeah,
might not
that's
be
good.
as,
That's really good advice for a
yeah,
practitioner, for
they
new
might not have as
practitioners.
good a like food and music scene, but you're going to
Hmm.
probably have a better quality of life standard of living ratio.
That's true. That's
So,
really true.
yeah.
Yeah, and you've talked so much about the efficacy and some of the standardization of Chinese herbal medicine. Uh, I have a question on where do you see, I guess, the current intersection of herbal medicine and conventional care,
Hmm.
and where do you see it going in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. Uh, it relates to your last question. In one of the changes that I've seen
Hmm.
is, and the last place we almost crossed paths but didn't actually was the integrative
Yes, I'm
reproductive.
sorry. Yes, we said
Uh,
hello, and
yeah,
I was always late going back to
yeah.
speakers. So,
Um,
right.
so just hats off to Yosan University for
Hmm.
organizing that event, the Integrative Reproductive Medical Symposium, which is, the really, I think that the most developed integrative, and by integrative I mean a space where TCM practitioners really develop deep literacy in the Western medical nuances
Hmm.
of, you
Right.
know, pathology, physiology, treatment optimization, as well as sticking to the core principles of Chinese medicine and not just rendering it science. And so I went to quite a few of those classes and thought this is the zenith of integrative Chinese medicine in
For
the
sure.
West. And these
Hmm.
are really, and that, it's part of what brings me joy about some elements of what we do that I'll share more about later. That um, it's really some of the most disciplined, brilliant, driven entrepreneurs uh, in the field, I believe, that have chosen to focus, maybe with the support of ABORM,
Hmm.
where there's a curriculum for, kind of stepping up to a primary care level of expression, where there's literacy in the medications used, procedures, risks, benefits, outcomes, surgical procedures, and uh, and then knowing how to optimize East Asian treatment plans and principles in conjunction to get the best possible therapeutic outcome. So much of, what, you're supporting people with, and we're supporting people with the tools to do, is help prepare themselves to have the best pregnancy outcomes possible. The other space I see that's developed itself that I think was a little bit ahead in the West is acupuncture orthopedics,
Hmm.
and really saw that, step up to primary care as a postgraduate cultivation and expression, something that a lot of people, who might have already had like a lot of people were either going to do physical therapy or they had a bodywork background and they came out and just really knew how to treat pain.
Hmm.
And I think that's another space where there's been early adoption into medical centers.
Right, right.
So,
Agreed. So, where do you see this integration occurring with herbs and pharmaceuticals? Because I think acupuncture is easy to integrate
mhm.
along with Western medicine, because, generally there's no interactions, right, with
Yeah.
any kind of Western pharmaceutical care. I feel like Chinese herbs is always a little trickier when you're dealing with integrating with pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. It's a really important topic. Where and how to unpack that. And I think that before we got online, we were discussing, what is the role within the context of fertility support, and um, when do you choose to bow out and let the reproductive endocrinologist do their method, And you articulated when a reproductive endocrinologist says no herbs during IVF, you say thank you. We're going to support with acupuncture and
That's right.
step aside. And that, when I was actively practicing and supporting people with fertility, was always my way too. I
Hmm.
don't want to be in conflict, and people are investing a lot of time, energy, and emotional resources.
Sure.
And where there's unknown, I don't want to be the vector of unclarity.
Right.
And if somebody doesn't have a good therapeutic outcome at that juncture, I don't want to take responsibility for that.
Hmm.
Now, I always ask senior experienced practitioners, it's a question I always ask, how do you feel about this? How do you practice? I won't name names, but I'm pleasantly surprised when people confidently are like, I think that we have to keep using herbs during IVF.
I
And
love that. I
and,
love
and
it.
it's people who've been practicing 30 years and have an inordinate amount of trust with the REs that they work with. They're getting the referrals from the REs,
Right.
and
Right.
they've demonstrated through a myriad of competencies and excellence that they're going to help everybody experience satisfaction and therapeutic outcomes,
Yeah. Better
practitioners,
results.
patients, etc. So
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
still believe in that as a possibility. A lot of my experiences with mental health, and one of my passions has been supporting people with more extreme states of consciousness. While I was doing my Chinese medical training, I was working in a group for young adults and children with severe developmental disabilities,
Hmm.
and most of their family, all of whom were on antipsychotics and other seizure medications, etc. And every one of their parents said, "Great, please see what you can do to help my child who's still suffering, still, having challenging behaviors or challenging internal
Hmm.
process, despite being on the best cocktails of."
Right. Right.
Uh, so I got my first real clinical herbal practical experience that I got to monitor, track, work in collaboration with other care providers. Before I got licensed in integrative pharmacology for mental health, and that's
Hmm.
remained something I've really cared about. It's a space that I built my practice on when I was more
Hmm.
actively practicing. Um, got a lot of referrals from psychiatrists, and/or people come to you and say, can you help me get off my medication for schizophrenia?
Yes.
And you say, no, but I'll work with your psychiatrist. And build a lot of trust in a active community, and um, have seen a lot of rewarding synergies with medications and herbs where I believe that one or the other isn't the right fit for people. So
Yeah.
I
That's
think there's a
incredible.
lot of frontier around that.
Hmm.
Um, the building blocks and barriers to, we can build relationships in uh, open-minded medical communities, and that's essential that people are doing that and teaching about it and sharing, because that's how medicine advances. um, the barriers to kind of full realization of a vision of that is lack of access to resource funds. When I see when I see, like, one example within the medical institution that's become very popular is like medical center in West Virginia. My friend was just at this academic conference, got $20 million to study psychedelic medicine for addiction. That's beautiful. That's amazing. What is it going to take for us to get $20 million grants to study integrative Chinese medicine? Um, I don't know. It's going to take a lot of
Yeah.
different quality of passion and maybe economic motivation to standardize it, because
That's
that's
right.
usually what's behind those, as well as some study
Hmm.
where there's a vested interest.
Right. Right.
So, um,
Yeah, it's so interesting to see how the landscape has changed over the last like even 5 years. And I think that there's patients are actually the ones driving the demand of Chinese herbal medicine. And, I think not even Chinese herbal medicine, but even supplements too.
mhm.
So there are some older generation reproductive endocrinologists that aren't as well versed in supplements, dietary supplements, nutrition, Chinese, or let alone Chinese herbs. And, some of the comments that patients will get is, sure, you could take it if it makes you feel better, and because there's not a lot of training in that area for these Western providers. Of course, we're all they're staying in their lane and they're going to do what they do best. And I really appreciate that and respect that. So I think that in the last 5 years or so, a lot of the REIs are kind of going out of their way to learn more about supplementation,
Hmm.
nutrients, antioxidants to kind of boost, at least in the fertility space, to boost egg and sperm quality. And, for the ultimate goal of better outcomes, right? Better quality embryos, successful
Hmm.
IVF cycles. But the Chinese herbal piece is still kind of this like mystical, sort of esoteric area where I feel like a lot of physicians and patients are kind of not afraid of it, but a little bit like unsure. It's like, I'm not sure about this. Should I or
Hmm.
should I not? And, luckily for patients, because if they're under the care of a provider who's pretty well versed in Chinese herbal medicine, with years of experience, they feel a little bit more confident taking Chinese herbs. But I still think that there's this kind of overall idea that Chinese herbs are there's so many herbs. Like it's almost overwhelming, for I think a Western provider to understand. And how can, 6 to 8 herbs in a formula be effective in treating PCOS or
Hmm.
endometriosis or, whatever the condition might be, IBS. And so it's easier to just say don't take it because they're used to single ingredient supplements, where Chinese herbs is generally, sort of this beautiful balance of herbs. And I think that is a little more intimidating. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts, Ben, on that?
I mean, I've encountered the exact same thing with
Mm.
any Western medical provider that, the, the my wife, I was, running our business while my wife was in medical school, and you see how indoctrinated people are. I've gotten some lenses into that where, you'll see medical students or young doctors say, well, there aren't really a lot of studies on that. It's like, have you looked for the studies? Well, no. Well, then why are you an authority? Because I'm a doctor and everybody puffed me up that that's the most important thing and that we know everything. So, so with that in mind, how do you present evidence to
Mhm.
people? Well,
Right.
a real strong suit that I've leaned in on is that in Japan, Kenpo, or the
Hmm.
Japanese expression of Shanghanlun, Jingwei Yaola, 2,000-year-old Chinese formulas that are codified, delivered in small amounts. We saw some presentations at the
Right. Right.
reproductive symposium on this. Um, it's standard of practice within obstetrics and gynecology,
Yeah.
and that
They
it's
have their
really
own
only delivered
formulary.
by physicians and pharmacists, and
Right. It's
everybody in
their
those
own
subdisciplines.
formulary of
Yeah,
Chinese herbs, correct? If
yeah,
I'm not mistaken.
yeah.
I have an uncle who is retired now, but he's a Western physician. Um, Not to digress too much, Ben, I'm a fourth generation Chinese medicine practitioner.
Yeah, right.
And my uncle actually, growing up, worked in the pharmacy with my grandfather, a
Uh-huh.
Chinese herbal pharmacy in Taiwan. So he had a really strong background in herbal medicine.
Yeah.
And he actually went to medical school in Japan
Uh-huh.
and became a primary care doctor there. And I remember visiting him as a kid, and he would have this ginormous community acupuncture room where he was doing acupuncture and moxibustion for all the
Yeah.
seniors. And I asked him, Uncle, how come you're doing all this acupuncture and moxibustion? And he goes, oh, because I don't want to prescribe pain meds to my senior population when I can treat them with this.
Uh-huh.
And it's so effective. And then he was talking to me about like the formularies of Chinese herbs, and he was literally saying, oh, number 226 is good for this.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, this is really cool how they practice this, they integrate it within their medicine, and patients have access to it through their pharmacies and their medical doctors. But it just kind of opened my eyes, and wow, Japan has has really integrated the medicine and has such a great way of practicing it.
Yeah.
And it kind of made me sad at how far away we are. But but that's okay. It's still, it exists in other countries and we can maybe eventually model after that.
Yeah. And
Um,
I think that, a couple of psychological cultural layers with that are, and just structural layers are, Chinese and Japanese have researched the exact same formulas.
yes.
There is a lot more trust and goodwill, I think, in the American psyche towards Japanese culture and maybe
Hmm.
Taiwanese culture. If you say, "Oh,
Hmm.
there's research in Japan," people are going
Right.
to say, "Oh yeah, that's legit." Whereas I
Right.
think there's more
Right.
skepticism of research
Yes.
quality in China. Um,
Hmm.
there's a culture of mistrust there,
That's a good point.
and
Hmm.
yeah. So I'll lean on both of those, but also the notion that they're standardized within the medical system,
Hmm.
and not everybody's ready for differential diagnosis, but they might be more open-minded to, hey, Guizhou Fuling shrinks fibroids, and
Yes.
here's this study on it, and here's
Right.
5 studies on it, because I
Yeah.
can go and
No.
find that.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Or Jiao Wei Xiao Yao San is good for PMS.
yeah.
I think can I ask you, Ben, and maybe what I'll do is I'll ask you for this link, but if you have any resources for these studies
Mm-hmm.
for patients to be able to access or listeners to be able to access, I would love that information.
Yeah, let me see what I can dig up. I think,
Okay. Sounds good.
yeah,
Well, I'll make sure to include
let's
that in the
pick a
show
few
notes.
targeted things together. I mean, there's research on formulas, and then there's quite a bit of animal research on individual herbs,
Hmm.
as well as in vitro research
Hmm.
related to pathogens. And so there's often, like, herbalists will use these as their rationale for inclusion in things. And I don't think that's inappropriately reductionistic. I mean, I think what we don't have time for is a 6-hour lecture on the differences between, the framework of differential diagnosis
Right.
for your
Right.
audience, and what that means, and
Hmm.
what this corpus of formulas is about. Many of the formulas that we use have were codified over 2,000 years ago for the first time,
Yeah.
and which means that they were used a long time before that, before they were copied into a text. They weren't invented and then put in a textbook. They were used,
Right.
trusted, and codified
Hmm.
in the that era's version of an academic environment, purportedly.
Sure.
And
Well, I
so,
think the longevity and the test of time of the use of herbs speaks for itself. And yeah, I think that it's again, if we are able to lean on the studies that are done in other countries, I think that is really, really helpful for us practitioners in the United States to
yeah,
be able to, open the minds of other practitioners as well as patients being more open to trying Chinese herbs. So, as far as Chinese herbal medicine, what are some of the common women's health conditions that you think Chinese herbs are really useful for?
yeah, that's a great question. I think that, um, we could say, which women's health conditions aren't they useful for?
Yeah, that's a better way of putting it.
Is true. PMS, PMDD is very
Hmm.
obvious, and something people have become very familiar with. Postpartum revitalization is something that
Yeah,
I think there's some widespread adoption of and awareness within birthing circles throughout the country. That acupuncture, moxibustion, herbal medicine, as well as East Asian dietetic therapy for
hmm.
rejuvenation,
Hmm.
has entered the public consciousness, and um, both in a practitioner sphere, that is, go see a practitioner, as well as information is popularized online, democratized, and kind of delivered, where people are like, "Oh, I should have warming, nutrient-dense foods."
Yes, right.
And here's what that means. I should have easy to digest
Hmm.
hypoallergenic foods, which is really consistent with dietetic training passed on over the centuries that I really relate to and think is really powerful.
Yeah, I love that you are emphasizing the care postpartum. What I know this is going to be different for everybody, but just so that is like a sort of a general idea, how long should women usually take Chinese herbs for postpartum care to really optimize their recovery?
Yeah, I think that I could, you know, I'm going to make something up.
I know
For the
it's very,
for
it's
the
an
rest of their
individualized
lives,
medicine,
for the
right?
rest of their lives is one answer.
Right.
Until they've achieved a similar level of vitality to which they know, and some women bounce back
Mhm.
and start consuming Chinese herbs and are like, I feel better than I did before I got pregnant.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
so, how do we train and nurture people's awareness of how good they can feel?
Yeah.
And what does vitality, access to joy, clarity, focus, all the things that we know that we can support people with feel like, as well as what is a good time frame for toning and supporting the uterus, or
Hmm.
tissues that have been insulted by the process of birth.
Hmm.
And some
Hmm.
of that's related to how sensations people experience. Some of that is related to culture. So you might say 6 to 9 months of Chinese herbal tonic therapy you know, before you should have another baby,
Yes.
because it's going to, as a kind of consideration.
Hmm.
That is, if people are planning to have more kids, investing more time, energy, and just will into consuming Chinese herbs uh,
Agreed. Yes.
is powerful.
Uh,
Two
yeah.
things I want to name,
Hmm.
just because I'm sure we'll run out of time, and I want to highlight menopause and menarche. I've
Yes.
really experienced a lot of satisfaction supporting young women in, during their transition to having a menstrual cycle through college, through early adulthood,
Hmm.
and or transitioning off of birth control medication
Hmm.
with herbal medication, supporting women having the experience that their menstrual cycle can actually be comfortable
Hmm.
and that it
Yes.
doesn't have to be a crisis every time,
Right. Right.
or is really powerful. Um, and it's a powerful educational juncture that we can provide.
I
And
love that.
then menopause is a long arc, and it's definitely a hot market in the dietary supplement markets. It's kind of
Hmm.
when you go to market analysis workshop meetings, or like, it's all about menopause right now. Here's this new tool that is Chinese
Yes.
herbs. Here's this
Yes.
new tool that is asparagus, or like, oh boy.
Right. So very, very,
Um,
very hot topic for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yes.
So uh, these are powerful places. The intersection of our professional skills as clinicians, how to navigate, what's really. I mean, I run a product company. I see other people running product companies. What is good patent medicine, over the counter
Hmm.
access, and what are the implications of that? How do we build bridges between over the counter access that is standardized and reliable, with our awareness that hands on, differentially diagnosed therapeutic treatment plans may really strongly bolster outcomes for consumers, um, is always an important dance.
Yeah, no, those are really great areas. I think that Chinese medicine can really benefit patients. So this is something I probably should have asked in the very beginning, Ben, but
Mm-hmm.
there are so many different forms of Chinese herbs, right? And so would you be able to share a little bit about that? And
Yeah,
I personally love your tinctures. They
yeah.
have changed my practice.
Yay.
And yeah, I can't tell you how many of my patients, how many people I've helped conceive, whether it's naturally or through some kind of ART,
Mm-hmm.
adjunctive support.
Mm-hmm.
And it never ceases to surprise me at how well those formulas work. And being able to like modulate them and being able to sort of custom tailor them, primarily using like the conceivable
Hmm.
line. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the different types of herbs because
Hmm.
patients, I don't know if they're necessarily or listeners are aware of all the different forms of Chinese herbs. And which form do you think is the most potent and effective?
Uh, yeah, that's a great question. So people who are watching or listening understand that Chinese herbs have been delivered through a variety of delivery systems or mediums over the past couple thousand years. And when you read traditional texts, they're
Hmm.
differentiated. Like these are made into honey pills. They're ground into a powder, taken as honey pills, and or they're made into a decoction or a boiled tea. We infuse teas commonly in the West by soaking things in hot water, whereas um, Chinese herbs are traditionally prepared kind of like making a stock, where you're cooking things for a half hour to an hour, uh,
Hmm.
straining that and consuming it. And so that's a very common delivery system. Um, there's a traditional history of tea pills being made that are commonly available in the West. There's a 20th century development of concentrated granulated extracts that are a common delivery system. And then liquid extracts or tinctures, which is what our company, Five Flavors Herbs, manufactures, are extracted via a mix of heat and solvent. In the case of our company, we use ethanol and water, where we do a decoction process, maybe some concentration, and then use gigantic hydraulic presses to strain things out. Um, what do I think is the best? The most potent is what people are experiencing and feeling, and
Hmm.
that is also culturally appropriate for them to use.
Good
And
point.
and
Yes.
so I think that's you can read like there's textbooks from Bob Flaws that really lay out this maxim of it's only going to work if you do it the traditional way, which is decoctions.
Hmm.
And like that's a great pillar of truth. And um,
But the reality of practice is very different.
yeah, the reality of practice is really different. I think that part of the formulation style that I like is that's also modeled in we talked about Kempo or Japanese herbal medicine, Japanese expression of Chinese herbal
Hmm.
formulas. They're
Hmm.
delivered in small doses over time. And I like to formulate with that in mind as another pillar of truth that taking things consistently over time is going to modify the body's physiology while concurrently formulating, which is another reason to go to practitioners is you can get things
Hmm.
customized for you,
Right.
formulating with things that are going to provide people with a more immediate signal that they experience relief. So you make a PMDD formula that has some antispasmodic herbs and some mood elevating herbs that are going to alleviate cramps and are going to alleviate emotional tension while also influencing the physiology of the liver and the hormones that there's going to be a cumulative effect. So take this 3 times a day. Every time you take it, you're going to experience less pain and more happy, or more
Hmm.
access to joy, or
Sure.
less whatever you're not, you know, the dysphoria part, less
Hmm.
dysphoric, um, with some immediacy. And that's part of why I love tinctures is people feel them in 30 seconds to a minute or like, I'm less grumpy, or
Or I'm
I'm
more
less
energized.
or less
Yeah.
anxious or more energized or have more
Yeah.
mental clarity.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that creates buy-in. And we got a lot of feedback during COVID from our I was skeptical. We manufacture these, I've manufactured tinctures for 30 years. I was skeptical about supplementing and building the vitality of the body with tinctures um, based on inputs. The thing that really most deeply changed my mind was during COVID, all of our Conceivable Pro line practitioners that we work with said, "Hey, Ben, we're not doing acupuncture right now. We're just doing herbs. And
Hmm.
these really work." That they were like part of the blind was pulled out of their
Yeah.
ongoing therapeutic study. and
Yeah,
shifted
for
their set of
sure.
feedback loops and amplified their convictions that these are really going to
Mhm.
support families in achieving their fertility goals. So that helped me think, yeah, these are really potent. Um,
Well, when you take one of the main, pillars of our tool
yeah,
being acupuncture, and
yeah.
then we're just leaning on diet, lifestyle, herbs, I mean, that's testimony in itself that Chinese herbs are working. And I would have to agree with that because, with the whole shelter in place situation with COVID, a lot of patients were still continuing to fill their herbs,
Hmm.
and not unfortunately being able to get acupuncture. So we were able to see that too. And, the number of people that were taking breaks from IVF and getting pregnant naturally was incredible. So I think part of that is definitely the Chinese herbal medicine. And the second part is just slowing down. Life was slowed down, less travel, less stress. The adrenals had time to recover and
Hmm.
reset. So there was definitely, that's like the silver lining during that time, I think, was being able to support, you know, better support our nervous systems during that time. And so for a lot of those women that were really, burning the candle at both ends, they no longer could do that. And so, they were freed from that lifestyle and then taking their tinctures, you know. So that's really great information. I'm glad that you were able to pull some of that data from your acupuncturists that are using your herbs. So I know we have to wrap it up, Ben. I really appreciate your time. I wanted to ask you two more questions. One
Yeah.
was, do you have any upcoming talks or workshops that are open to clinicians
Hmm.
or patients?
Um, yes, for clinicians. I don't know what the timeline of people hearing this is. So
It'll be in May.
one
We'll be
one.
releasing. Hmm.
So I have many classes happening between here and when this is going to be released. Um,
Awesome.
if people want to subscribe to Five Flavors Herbs,
Hmm.
we don't spam people. We gently send out messages, and we offer a variety of classes geared towards our practitioner audience.
Okay,
So uh,
great.
the core of the expression of our company is the intersection of practitioners. We're wholesaling to practitioners, and we're contract manufacturing, but we also do some direct to consumer stuff based on um, TCM principles and Western herbs. And we are all our classes are open to the public. So if people are Chinese medical curious, you
Yeah,
can look up
nice.
what's been out there. You can say, "Hey, that topic interests me."
Hmm.
We have a uh, colleague friend, Parker, offering some really great classes on the intersection of proline and East Asian differential diagnosis, TCM differential diagnosis, and um, functional medicine. So she does a lot of
Nice.
labs and has
Okay.
translated that framework into part of her TCM differential. And so I thought that was really powerful. And
Yeah, that's a
the
great
second
combination.
half of that is next week. So um, we have guests a lot, as well as myself and sometimes my wife doing classes on different topics. Sometimes we do field studies. I think I'm presenting at the fall um, internal medicine Yosan event.
Hmm.
So yeah, we
Okay,
like to
fantastic.
share things.
Yes, we love it. You guys get out there. So, so sign up for the newsletter and then they would get announcements on the
Yeah.
different talks.
Or this
Okay.
is a practitioner and you reach out to us and say, what kind of catalog of recordings that are representative do you have? We're going to
Yes.
say, here's this big catalog of recordings, and here's what are you most interested in?
Nice. I
So,
love
yeah.
that. Such great resources. Okay, last question. Ben, any words of wisdom to share with our audience today, just for
Um,
overall wellness, health,
yeah. I mean,
longevity?
I think developing therapeutic relationships with skillful, experienced practitioners before you need them. So somebody knows the landscape of your body and they can be somebody that you check in regularly for maintenance is a really powerful way to consume Chinese medicine. receive the education, the lifestyle education that comes on a regular basis, and the there's kind of an old maxim that the really skillful practitioner doesn't have sick patients because they're so busy nurturing the wellness of the people.
Hmm.
And of
I
course,
love
that's
that.
kind of that could be construed as a luxury model. Um,
Sure, why not? We all
yeah,
deserve to have a luxury model.
yeah.
Yes.
So, but that's one of those kind of pillars to consider. Like,
Hmm.
I want to go to the clinic where everybody's vital and
Yeah,
the
for sure.
practitioner's energized and yeah. So I think that's developing those relationships. So as we go through our different life cycles, whether it's you know unanticipated insults to our body, mind, organs, etc., or predictable, such as menopause or anticipated pregnancy. Like it's really great,
Hmm.
important, powerful. Um, Also, in that screening process, understand who's willing to work with our Western doctors and find the right Western doctors that are open-minded. That's how consumers can change. Is advocate for collaborative relationships because I think that's where the best work gets done.
Hmm. That's great advice, Ben.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for your time today.
yeah.
I
Thanks for
learned a
having
lot.
me.
I learned a lot from you,
Yeah,
actually. And I think one of the pearls that I got from our conversation today
yeah.
that I just want to mention is the consistency of herbal medicine being incorporated into your care. I think a lot of times as a practitioner, we're always focused on a condition we're treating and that, here's the time frame we're going to be treating for. And if it's for fertility, we're like phasic formulas, right? And we're thinking about, okay, once they get pregnant, great, we might switch them to another formula. But I really appreciated what you said about thinking about Chinese herbal medicine as part of your way of life and consistency of treatment and for wellness, actually. So thank you for that reminder and for that
Yeah.
pearl. As a
I need to remind
practitioner,
myself too. Yeah, but
yeah,
yeah,
compo, right? The small
yeah.
doses. And yeah,
Mhm.
I think it's awesome. So again, thank you so much for your time, Ben.
Yeah,
And
likewise. Thank you for having
yes.
me and glad to share.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you at the next conference for
Yep,
sure.
yep. We'll be in touch.
Okay, sounds good.